from BonitaSoft to present instead of our co-founder and Chief Service Officer, Ruth Cernes. So just imagine I'm just a puppet and he's taking and speaking to you. Natural. This one, right? Still. So apart from being a co-founder of the company, Ruth Cernes is in charge of all delivery-related services with BonitaSoft. And with this, has been able to have a deep and large feedback and broad feedback on all BPM projects we've been able to be involved in, both from an open source and from a commercial perspective, which gives him a global vision of anything and everything we can do with our solution. So first and foremost, the agenda, what's BPM, and then use cases, and then technical and business best practices on how to envisage BPM projects. What is business process management? Business process management has, if you look, a large number of exceptions and senses in our work, going from business analysis to business automation to a number of mixes of this, close to ESB sometimes, very technical, close to BPA sometimes, very functional. And basically, for us, just to make kind of ideas clear about what we're going to talk about, for us the idea is to basically be the link between two words, between a functional and between a technical work, to ensure that what is being thought of by the business is being implemented according to technical best practices in terms of business automation. So means to model, automate, measure, and improve processes that people use on a day-to-day basis. Who we are? We're a company now, sponsoring and developing and nurturing an open source project called Bonita. So company BonitaSoft with 10,000 contributors in our community, more than 1 million downloads now, and an ecosystem that's global and reaches a number of direction and very various projects. So for us, BPM is about being flexible, transparent, affordable, providing the open source business model as well as very open architecture to be able to handle very technical projects and initiatives with a modular architecture, and ensuring maximum, because absolute interoperability is impossible, but maximum interoperability, and making sure that when we start a project, we take into account what exists from an SI perspective. We had that joke during one of the breakouts, that is, in real life, you never start on a blank sheet. Regardless of what you want to do in real life, you start with a number of constraints, technical constraints, from an architecture perspective, a number of constraints, a number of systems in place, and coming in and saying, we're going to come with our set of constraints, and Mr. Project Leader, Mr. Project Team, you're going to have to adjust to our constraint in something that we cannot do. So interoperability and ability to merge the solution and the project we have into the project team and the project constraints is compulsory. The example I was quoting is, it would never occur to anyone to go into a room and say, I don't like the color of your walls, and I don't like the color of your tables. So I'm going to come with my paintings and change all of that before I start working. It would never occur to anyone. But it would occur to many people to come in a project and say, hey, you're using, for example, you're using Tomcat. I don't like it. I have a problem with some of the stacks of this, because I'm running only on JBoss. So please, Mr. Project Team, or everybody, change everything you do. Do that from the start, because you have to abide by my constraints. But from a technical perspective, it could happen. It does happen very often if I look around at all the smiles I see. So, and really from, in addition to this, when you talk about BPM, you talk about something that is in the middle of many, many, many things. If you look at the way we're looking and exposing our architecture to the rest of the environment of the customer, or the project or the initiative we're working on, well, you have a million ways of interacting at a million levels. From a business perspective, from a technical perspective, from a language perspective, from at any level, you put yourself out to look at the way you should integrate or work. There are many different exposures. And handling all of this is extremely complex if we want to do it right, i.e. if we want to take the constraints of the customer and the constraints of the project as the center, as the key point of the way we're working. So if you look at the BonitaSoft architecture, what we try to do is to work on an architecture that is a nutshell and that exposes a number of services around in all directions so that any project can find a way to establish a dialogue with us. If you just look at the way we expose web services, today we have 4. And we are meant to have more because exposing a web service is great. Having a variety of ways to do it is even better. And in terms of best practices from project, not to deviate too much from the purpose of the presentation, in terms of the best practices for project, what we've learned is being able to communicate with an external application, whatever it is good. Being able to communicate in the right way with an external application is a different story. You can define or decide that you can work with the REST API, for example. What you're going to do if you do this, you're going to have to take into account the performance here. Is that the best way? Is it the right way? Is there another way to achieve the same value or the same effect? And am I at the right level from the technical perspective? And ideally, and that's something I'm going to come back to later on, one of the key issues with BPM project is defining at all levels of detail, what is strategic, what is important, and what is accessory. What is it that you want to achieve in real? Are we trying to make 2 databases communicate in real time? Is a batch sufficient? Is etc., etc., etc. You can imagine and you can carve out many scenarios around this because it is critical to define what's key and what's not. Sounds obvious?
Yeah.
Well, so what we're trying to do from a best practice and from a BPM perspective is to open up to many different variety of connectors in our system, but also to be able to enter a large variety of different ecosystems so that we are able to, well, this is more around applications, but you can also have the equivalent around different technical standards so that we're sure that we can enable as many options as possible. As any software in the world, we have limitations, obviously, but the idea and the challenge and the challenge we're trying to undertake and we're looking to undertake is to be as open as possible, to be able to give options that are fit for any kind of endeavor. In terms of use cases, BPM is useful in a large variety of environments. These are business use cases, but in terms of objective, we're talking about completely different things from a technical perspective behind this. If you're looking at the help desk initiative, it would be around reducing response time, that is monitoring SLAs, having real-time reporting, etc., and real-time actionable information. Sales order management is around reducing the processing capacity and therefore reducing the risk associated to contracts and to contract closing. In terms of e-government, we're looking at reducing administrative cost and ensuring better quality of service for the citizen, etc., etc. building application around business process management is something that has so many varieties of working, of ways of working, that we end up being in completely different situations every time. And therefore, what seems obvious when we say it around, well, making sure we know what we want to do, becomes extremely difficult when we have situations where people can't talk. Can't talk not because they don't want to talk, but can't talk because they don't speak the same language. And because a word, a sentence, doesn't have at all the same meaning for one and for the other. Yeah, I would like to integrate with ASAP, take something big and fat. I would like my application, my process to be integrated with ASAP. Somebody from business saying this is saying, I would like to get data from there. Somebody from architecture will start thinking integration between two systems, one being extremely complex and difficult to handle, as well as proprietary. How I'm going to manage this from an architecture perspective. The DBA will start looking and saying, oh, from a response time, that's a time, what information do I need, etc., etc., and I can keep on talking, etc., where the only thing that was requested initially was, I would like to get the start date from my employee, because it is the entry point of my business process. Yes, and in real life, it's a real life challenge on a day-to-day basis and on a minute-to-minute basis. So starting by making sure that people can talk to each other is one of the biggest and most complicated challenge in BPM. And that explains the fact that we, as BonitaSoft, have designed to put on top of the engine that is the base and the core of the solution, to put a design console. And the purpose of the design console is to get people talking at the level to which they need to talk. Looks like this. It's a GUI interface that's extremely easy to work on, and where functional people can start adding value, validating content, validating the process, and saying, what I need there is this. They can write there, they can get used to it, so that later, therefore, once we have a design, at least the first version of the design, we can take it from there, and from a process development perspective, define what is needed and how to do things that we need to do. One of the key best practices that we've learned from the project we've been able to be involved in is that sometimes some people don't really mind on whether we go one direction or another in terms of process. That is, a step here or there could mean the difference between this and that could be really nothing. From a business perspective, that is the way we get this information like this or like that in real time or not in real time. From a business perspective, can make no difference. However, from an architecture perspective, it can have impacts completely different. So what we've been, in terms of best practices, able to learn is that making iteration and making architecture impact studies as well as development impact studies before we start developing, saying going in that direction will take that time, going in this direction will take this time. Do you really need it? Is it really mandatory for what you're trying to achieve? Is something that we're looking at in terms of loop constantly. Because then if you want, we had a great presentation earlier about the Cliff project. If you look at, I would like my platform to be performing and have a reporting on this, does mean a tremendous amount of different things from different people. However, at the end of the day, performance has to be there, because there is this SLA to be given by Orange to its customer, by any company or any entity having a strategic endeavor.